Shamima Begum was born on August 25, 1999, in London, England, to parents of Bangladeshi origin. She grew up in Bethnal Green, East London, in a British Bangladeshi Muslim household. Her father worked in retail, and her mother was a homemaker. The family was part of a settled immigrant community, and Begum was raised alongside her siblings in what was described as a stable environment. She attended local schools before enrolling at Bethnal Green Academy, where she studied for her GCSEs. Her adolescence was unfolding during a period when the Syrian civil war had evolved into a complex international conflict, and when the militant group known as the Islamic State had declared a caliphate across large parts of Syria and Iraq. ISIS's declaration in June 2014 was accompanied by a global propaganda campaign designed to recruit foreign fighters and families. The group used online magazines, encrypted messaging, social media accounts, and personal outreach to target young Muslims in Europe, North America, and elsewhere across the globe. The propaganda portrayed life in the caliphate as orderly, religiously authentic, and purposeful, while downplaying or justifying the violence that was part of the defensive jihad. In December 2014, a fellow student from Bethnal Green Academy, Shamima Begum, of no relation, travelled to Syria to join ISIS. Her departure would raise alarms within the school and with local authorities, with police visiting the school to speak with students and warn them about the risks of radicalization. But despite these interventions, Shamima Begum and two close friends, Khadija Sultana and Amira Abbas, continued to communicate with individuals who were linked to ISIS's online network. On the 17th of February 2015, the three girls left their homes early in the morning. They travelled to Gatwick Airport and boarded a flight to Istanbul, Turkey. CCTV footage that was later released showed them passing through the airport without apparent difficulty. Their families would report them missing later that day, and Turkish authorities detained them briefly after they were flagged as missing minors. But they were released and subsequently crossed into Syria with the assistance of smugglers who were connected to ISIS. The speed and coordination of their journey indicated that they had been in close contact with facilitators prior to leaving the UK. Investigations later suggested that online recruitment networks had played a significant role. This case became one of the most prominent examples of British teenagers travelling to join ISIS during its peak years of territorial control. Upon arrival in Syria, Begum entered a territory governed by ISIS's strict interpretation of Islamic law. The city of Raqqa functioned as the group's administrative capital, and foreign women who travelled to ISIS-held areas were generally expected to marry ISIS fighters rather quickly upon arrival. Within approximately 10 days of arrival, Begum was married to Jago Riedijk, a Dutch convert to Islam who had joined ISIS after travelling from the Netherlands. Riedijk was several years older than Begum, who was just 15 years old when she departed from the UK. Riedijk later stated in interviews that he had been radicalised in Europe before travelling to Syria, and that he and Begum lived together in various locations as the front lines in Syria shifted. Begum has consistently denied taking part in combat or enforcement roles within ISIS structures, and there is no public evidence that she personally committed acts of violence. However, she lived within a regime responsible for systematic atrocities, including mass executions, enslavement of Yazidi women, persecution of religious minorities, and terrorist attacks both within Syria and abroad. Between 2015 and 2017, ISIS began losing territory under sustained military pressure from Iraqi forces, Kurdish militias, and an international coalition led by the United States. Airstrikes intensified, infrastructure collapsed in many ISIS-controlled areas, and access to electricity, food supplies, medical care, and sanitation deteriorated dramatically. Civilians in ISIS territory faced increasing hardship as the group's governance structures crumbled. During her time in Syria, Begum became pregnant multiple times. She gave birth to 3 children, with the first 2 dying in infancy amid worsening living conditions and with limited access to medical care. The exact details of the causes of death have not been fully disclosed to the public, but illness and the collapse of infrastructure in war zones were widely reported factors affecting many children in ISIS-controlled areas during this period. By early 2019, ISIS's final territorial stronghold was under siege in Baghouz, eastern Syria. Begum was heavily pregnant at the time and fled the area, along with other women and children, as Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces closed in. She surrendered and was transferred first to Al-Hawl camp, which held tens of thousands of displaced individuals linked to ISIS fighters. In February 2019, Begum was located in Al-Hawl camp by Times reporter Anthony Lloyd. At the time, she was 19 years old and 9 months pregnant. During the interview, she expressed a desire to return to the United Kingdom. She was also asked what life was like inside territory controlled by the Islamic State. During the interview, she stated that she did not regret joining ISIS, and that she had seen, quote, severed heads in bins, adding that this didn't faze her at the time because she had become desensitized, and that she saw it as normal in a war environment. Her exact comments were widely reported, with global headlines including statements such as, "Seeing severed heads didn't faze me at all," and articles reporting how she had become used to it. She also mentioned seeing the head of a captured fighter displayed in a bin in Raqqa. Those remarks caused significant public backlash in the United Kingdom, with many interpreting her comments as showing a lack of remorse or empathy. However, in later interviews, Begum said that she had been in shock and that she regretted the way she had expressed herself in that initial interview. Shortly after the interview, Begum would give birth to her 3rd child, a son named Jarrah. But sadly, in March 2019, the baby would die of pneumonia in the camp. Humanitarian organizations operating in the camp reported severe shortages of medical supplies and difficult living conditions. By this point, Begum had lost all 3 of her children in Syria. The death of Jarrah intensified debate in the United Kingdom. Some argued that the government's refusal to allow her to return had indirectly contributed to the infant's death, while others maintained that her own decisions to join ISIS were the root cause of the tragedy. Either way, the political response came swiftly. On the 19th of February 2019, then Home Secretary Sajid Javid exercised powers under the British Nationality Act 1981 to deprive Shamima Begum of her British citizenship on the grounds that it was, quote, conducive to the public good. The Home Office argued that through descent she was eligible for Bangladeshi citizenship and therefore would not be rendered stateless. Bangladesh's government responded publicly, stating that Begum was not a Bangladeshi citizen and therefore would not be permitted entry into Bangladesh. As a result, Begum was left effectively stateless, though the UK government maintained that the legal test had been satisfied. Begum's legal team launched an appeal against the deprivation order. They argued that she had been groomed and trafficked as a minor, and that revoking her citizenship while she was detained abroad prevented her from mounting an effective legal challenge. The case would proceed through multiple stages of the British court system. In July 2020, the Court of Appeal ruled that Begum should be allowed to return to the United Kingdom in order to pursue her appeal, citing the importance of procedural fairness. The government would appeal this decision to the Supreme Court. In February 2021, The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that national security concerns outweighed Begum's right to return to the UK in order to participate in her appeal in person. The judgment emphasised that the court should give weight to the Home Secretary's assessment of security risks. As a result, Begum was not permitted to return to the UK. Her case then proceeded before the Special Immigration Appeals Commission. SIAC hears cases involving sensitive security evidence that cannot be disclosed publicly. In February 2023, SIAC ruled that the decision to deprive Begum of her citizenship had indeed been lawful. The Commission acknowledged that there were credible grounds to believe she had been groomed and potentially trafficked for sexual exploitation as a child, but they concluded that this did not render the Home Secretary's decision unlawful. Begum appealed once more, however, in February 2024. The Court of Appeal, however, would dismiss her appeal, upholding SIAC's ruling. The court concluded that the Home Secretary had acted within his legal powers. As of 2026, Begum remains in northern Syria and has exhausted most domestic legal avenues. Reports indicate that an application to the European Court of Human Rights has also been considered, though no final outcome has been reported publicly. Throughout these proceedings, Begum's parents have remained in the UK. They have consistently argued that their daughter was groomed online and radicalised as a child. They have stated that she should be brought back to Britain to face investigation or prosecution if warranted, rather than being left indefinitely in a camp. They have also spoken about the deaths of their 3 grandchildren, describing the emotional toll on the family. Yago Redike was captured by Kurdish forces and detained separately. He has given interviews expressing regret for joining ISIS, and has faced the prospect of prosecution in the Netherlands. He has stated publicly that he wished Begum could return to Europe. Conditions in Al-Roj camp, where Begum has been held, remain difficult. The camp houses women and children linked to ISIS fighters, and is guarded by Kurdish forces with limited resources. Reports from humanitarian organisations describe overcrowding, limited access to healthcare, poor sanitation, and sporadic security incidents. Some European countries, including the United Kingdom, have repatriated women and children from the camp, often prosecuting adults upon return. Over time, Begum's public statements have evolved. In later interviews, including a documentary broadcast in 2021, she expressed regret and stated that she did not support ISIS's ideology. She described feeling influenced and misled. However, critics argue that these statements conflict with her earlier remarks, although there are supporters who contend that her initial interviews occurred under stressful circumstances, and that she has since reflected on her actions. There has also been a change in Begum's clothing. After leaving the UK in 2015 in order to join ISIS, she adopted clothing associated with the group's strict interpretation of Islamic dress, including the black niqab. During that period, ISIS enforced rigid dress codes for women, and Western-style clothing was generally prohibited in territories they controlled. In early interviews, Begum was still wearing Islamic clothing. However, in later interviews from the refugee camp, Begum was seen wearing Western-style clothing, including jeans, a shirt, and a hat. Her hair was straightened, and her nails were painted. This change in style drew significant media attention, with some commentators questioning whether it reflected a change in beliefs, a practical adaptation to her circumstances, or an attempt to influence public perception amid her legal efforts to return to the UK. There is no doubt that Begum's case has divided opinions. Critics argue that depriving individuals of citizenship disproportionately affects those with immigrant backgrounds, and that it may create a two-tier system of nationality, with international human rights experts, including UN Special Rapporteurs, have criticised the UK's approach, believing that Begum may have been a victim of trafficking, and that the UK has an obligation to investigate her recruitment and to protect her as a child. They have also raised concerns about the indefinite detention in Syrian camps. Either way, as of 2026, Shamima Begum is still in northern Syria and no longer possesses British citizenship. She has lost all 3 of her children and her husband remains detained separately, and the debate surrounding her case continues to influence discussions about radicalization, accountability, trafficking, statelessness, and the responsibility of states towards citizens who have joined extremist organizations as a minor. But at the root of it all are a series of undisputed facts. She left the UK voluntarily at 15 to join ISIS. She married a Dutch fighter and she lived under ISIS rule until its collapse. She gave birth to 3 children who all died in infancy. And until she realized that it looked bad, she told reporters that she didn't regret joining ISIS, and that she was unfazed by the atrocities committed by ISIS. The UK government has made it very clear that they do not want Shamima Begum to return to her country of birth, and so for the foreseeable future, she will remain in detention at the centre of one of the most significant and controversial national security cases in modern British history. Thank you for watching today's video. If you found it informative, please leave a like or a comment down below. All of our content, from the research and script writing to the editing and narration, is completely human driven, without the use of AI. So if you want to support our channel, consider subscribing and use the bell icon to get notifications on when the next Wars of the World video is released. Thank you for watching.